He was exiled as weak, but now he's the strongest and unbeatable healer. In this world, 2 centuries have passed since a hero defeated the evil Jaryu and saved the world. In the present day, amidst a scene of destruction where it seems a carriage has been attacked by monsters, a young, defenseless girl is left at the mercy of the attackers, until a man steps in front of her to protect her. In the next scene, the series protagonist, Lost, is invited by a girl to form a group with her, leaving everyone at the Adventurers Guild of Mardat completely stunned. The healer happens to be holding a sign that says, looking for people to form a group, so Marcena shows off her skills right in front of him, making it clear that she means business. A bit embarrassed by this little spectacle, Lost introduces himself as a healer, or something like that. Amidst, a guild employee, grabs the scatterbrained girl by the shoulders and asks if she has any idea that she's inviting Lost the Useless to her group. According to her, this guy is only capable of using basic healing and nothing more. An orphan from the labyrinth, he's been an adventurer since childhood, but has yet to develop his skills to a higher level, making him a complete incompetent. As if that weren't enough, one day a group called Lightning Blades recruited him as a member, but he was soon kicked out. For these reasons and more, this sorry excuse for a healer is known as the most useless guy in Mardat. Assuming Marcena isn't wealthy, Amherst quickly warns her that she'll go broke if she depends on this guy. Speaking of which, Marcena pulls out a bag of money and reassures her that she'll be fine, causing the guild worker to push her against the wall, warning her not to flash that kind of cash in a place crawling with shady characters like the ones lurking in the corners of this dive. Innocent Marcena thanks the woman for the advice, and seeing that the girl is new to all of this, Amherst offers to find a group of beginners for her. But Marcena tells her she made up her mind a long time ago to form a group with that man over there. With that said, the young girl approaches Lost again, leaving the guild worker intrigued by her persistence. Either way, Amherst hands them the registration form for group members, and while Lost signs it, Marcena gazes at him in admiration, thinking she's finally found the person she's been looking for. When the boy passes her the form to write her name, she jumps in surprise, having been so lost in thought. Once that's settled, Amherst asks for the service fee, which is paid by the healer. With that done, Marcena enthusiastically announces that the group is officially formed and extends her hand to greet her new companion. Even though he doesn't quite understand the reason for her excitement, the boy shakes her hand politely. Without delay, the two head to the Mardat labyrinth, and along the way, Lost explains to his partner that no one has ever reached the end of it, so it's unknown what kind of boss might be lurking there. Many parts of the dungeon remain unexplored, leaving plenty of space for new adventures, making Mardat the largest city with a labyrinth in the region. Marcena asks if it's really a good idea for them to head straight into the dungeon, since the guild woman had suggested they go to the western field first. To this, Lost explains that several areas in Mardat have monster appearances due to the magical energy leaking from the labyrinth, like the mountainous region to the east, the northern forest, and the southern swamp. Lastly, there's the western field, where the creatures are indeed weaker, but the issue is that the area is so vast that finding them is difficult. On the other hand, the labyrinth is filled with creatures, and if they stick to the dungeon's early sections, the monsters will be weak and not pose much of a challenge. After their journey, the duo finally reaches the entrance to the labyrinth. Marcena takes the lead as any good martial artist should, leaving her healer in support. Lost is fine with this, but the truth is, he isn't sure if this beginner can handle tanking the monsters in the dungeon. However, her ability becomes evident soon after, as she punches every monster that appears in front of her without mercy, even striking a victory pose with impressive flair. Faced with this, Lost admits she's not to be underestimated. As for the items dropped by the defeated monsters, the healer explains to the novice that they are magic stones, which adventurers sell to the guild. The guild then uses the magic infused in the items to create various things. Since she's not very good with the theoretical side of being an adventurer, Marcena had no idea about this, even though it's basic knowledge for anyone pursuing this path. On the other hand, she's competent enough in practice to stay afloat in the field for now. By the way, she wants to know how much these magic stones are worth, and Lost tells her that the items dropped by goblins don't fetch much. If she wants to make more money, she'll need to defeat stronger monsters that drop pricier items. At least what they've collected so far is enough to cover tonight's lodging, so the group has to decide whether to keep going or return to the city. Marcena, of course, wants to venture deeper into the labyrinth, assuring him that she'll protect her healer no matter what. And so the duo resumes their adventure toward the deeper parts of the dungeon, where the martial artist narrowly avoids falling into a trap. Lost was ready to save her just in time, placing a stone on a block to trigger the trap, which opens a huge pit in the ground, revealing iron spikes at the bottom and several victims who had fallen. Startled, Marcena asks how he was able to spot the trap, and he explains that the block in question was darker than usual, leading him to suspect something. She thought trap detection was a thief's skill, but Lost simply says that after being an adventurer for so long, he's picked up a trick or two. Moving forward, the group encounters an orc mid-level demons that shouldn't be at this part of the labyrinth due to their immense strength, according to the healer. Arsena wonders if it would be better to flee, but Lost insists they can defeat the orc if they work together. Without hesitation, Arsena takes the lead against the fearsome adversary, who lets out a roar that shakes the dungeon walls. Still, the fighter holds her ground and charges at the enemy, landing a powerful spinning kick to its chest. In reality, it feels like kicking a concrete wall, but the intent counts. That aside, at least the orc is much slower than she is, allowing the martial artist to dodge its attacks. That is, until the orc slams its club into the ground, sending shards of rock flying everywhere, one of which strikes Arsena's arm. Following that, the monster gains the upper hand and pins her against the wall, ready to deliver what seems to be the finishing blow. However, Lost steps in at the last second, defeating the orc with his own sword. Arsena watches the scene unfold as if her teammate were a true hero saving her in the nick of time, which isn't far from the truth. Shocked, she asks if he's really just a healer. He plays the same card as before, explaining that he learned to fight after being an adventurer for quite some time. Putting that aside, he notices that Arsena's arm is injured from the shards and offers to heal it. Once that's done, they collect the magical stone left behind by the defeated orc, a much more valuable item than those dropped by the goblins. Even though they've already gathered quite a bit of wealth, Arsena wants to keep descending the labyrinth to face tougher challenges, and Lost doesn't object. By late afternoon, they return to the guild with a large haul of magical stones. Amidst can't believe they collected so many items just by venturing into the western field, especially with an orc stone among them. She accuses Lost of taking the rookie into the deeper levels of the labyrinth. Lost explains that the orc was at the labyrinth's entrance for reasons unknown to them, and the receptionist believes him, since she's heard rumors that something strange is happening in the Mardet dungeon. However, being in a lower-ranking position, she hasn't been informed of the details by her superiors. Setting the conversation aside, Amidst asks if they want to sell all the stones, and when Lost confirms, the receptionist beams with excitement and rushes to arrange their payment. Arsena doesn't understand why she's so happy, so Lost explains that guild employees earn a commission when adventurers under their management sell something to the guild. For this reason, Amidst makes it clear that the adventurers are doing her a huge favor, which is why she no longer seems upset that they disobeyed her order to head to the western field instead of the labyrinth. Since there's no use crying over spilled milk, the receptionist hands them their payment, a sum 10 times larger than what Lost was used to receiving on his previous expeditions. In other words, he's just realized that his old group, the Lightning Blades, have been cheating him all along. Arsena grumbles that the guild should ensure all group members receive their fair share for the work they've done, to which Amidst responds that they only mediate when the group pays the required fee. Lost decides to let it go, as the Lightning Blades are in the past, and it's time for him to move on. With that, the team bids farewell to the guild employee, while a man upstairs named Handsome watches the healer as he leaves the establishment. A little later, while Amidst is gleefully counting her newly acquired coins as if she were a child receiving a birthday present, Handsome appears to scold her for placing Lost in a new group. She explains that she didn't recommend the healer to anyone. A girl named Arsena insisted on forming a group with him. Speaking of the protagonist, Lost takes his teammate to a tavern, where they're warmly greeted by a young waitress who seems less than thrilled to see her friend accompanied by another girl. Afterward, he approaches Mary, the waitress's mother, to book a room, and the innkeeper asks if they'll be together or separate. Arsena feels a little anxious, but Lost doesn't hesitate to say they'll take separate rooms. Hearing this, the martial artist quietly admits to herself that she would have preferred sharing the room. Either way, they head to their respective quarters and wish each other a good night. As she lies in bed, Arsena recalls her childhood when her carriage overturned on the road and Lost healed her arm. That day, she decided to become an adventurer and form a group with the healer, ensuring he'd have nothing to worry about because she'd be there to protect him. Since that event, she trained hard to fulfill her promise and went straight to Marta when she heard Lost had been kicked out of his group. But now that he's on her team, she's saddened that he doesn't seem to recognize her, as she's much different from the girl she was back then. Furthermore, even though Arsena trained rigorously, it doesn't seem like Lost really needs her help, as he's proven to be stronger than the rumors suggested. Either way, she's determined to keep her promise and remain in the group with the healer. After all, she doesn't understand why people call him useless when it's clear that Lost has real talent. The following day, amidst a swamp, a group of adventurers face a seven-headed hydra, though two of its heads had already been severed. Margulis, the warrior clad in golden armor, stood at the front, though visibly uneasy. Armia, the sorceress beside him, was the most nervous of them all. The group's rogue, Siberia, was too injured to continue fighting, while Lost tended to her wounds. Although he didn't have a cure to rid her of the poison, he can restore her physical strength to help her fight it off. The rogue complained that the healer was useless, prompting the frontline warrior to order them to stop bickering and return to the fight if the healing was done. However, the healing wasn't complete as Lost couldn't neutralize the poison. As he mentioned, they should have brought an antidote, but their leader had deemed it too expensive and chose not to buy one. Even so, he blamed Lost for being a worthless healer. At that moment, the Hydra struck again, targeting Margulis, who blocked the attack with his sword and shouted for Armia to cast a spell. Armia launched a fireball, but it barely scratched the beast. Frustrated with his allies, the warrior declared them all useless. Unwilling to face the mission alone, he decided to retreat, abandoning his companions. Armia followed Margulis, while Lost carried Siberia in his arms and also retreated. In the next scene, we are taken back to the moment when Margulis expelled Lost from the group Lightning Blades. Siberia accused the healer of being the reason they failed to defeat the Hydra, to which Lost argued that perhaps they were also to blame, given they were so excited that they stayed up all night and weren't at their best during the fight. Margulis asked if Lost was implying the fault lay with him, though that wasn't exactly what Lost had said. Siberia added that they should ask Armia whose fault it was. Feeling intimidated, the innocent sorceress glanced at the group leader and, pointing her finger at Lost, placed the blame on him. At that moment, Lost awoke from the dream, a bead of sweat on his forehead, realizing that if he was dreaming about it, it must have bothered him more than he thought. In fact, something similar had happened 6 years earlier. At that time, he was already known as Lost the Useless, but he still aspired to become a top-tier adventurer. It was during this period that another group reached out to him, but the truth was, they didn't want a healer. They wanted live bait to distract the monsters. For a labyrinth orphan like Lost, this kind of treatment was all too common. What he didn't expect, however, was that the monsters would turn on the group that caused all the trouble and wipe them out. Upon leaving that dungeon, Lost was left traumatized, never having been acknowledged as a true adventurer. On that day, he came across an overturned carriage in the middle of the road, surrounded by armed goblins. In the chaos, there was a defenseless girl, and the young man rushed her aid without thinking. Even today, he doesn't quite understand why he made that impulsive decision. He just went. Maybe it was because the life of a labyrinth orphan didn't hold much value, but if he could trade his life to save that girl, then his death wouldn't be in vain. Perhaps that was what he was thinking. During the fight, however, he was struck on the head and knocked unconscious. Hours later, when night had fallen, he woke up beside the carriage girl, along with Knights of the Order who had come to her rescue and finished the job. In other words, it wasn't Lost who saved her. The useless remained useless. Reflecting on this, the healer gave a brief, accepting chuckle. But the girl who had been saved thanked him for his help, because without him, the knights wouldn't have arrived in time. Embarrassed, Lost didn't know how to respond, so he healed a wound on the girl's arm. In his words, that was all he could do. He then shared the story of how he ended up there, explaining how his former companions had thrown him to the wolves. The girl was horrified by their cruelty and began to cry at the heartlessness of those people. It was at that moment she decided that when she grew up, she would become an adventurer and promised to form a party with the healer. Despite this, after the girl's departure, Lost reflected that she was a noble's daughter and had no real chance of becoming an adventurer. Even though he didn't harbor any illusions about it, her words still encouraged him, and he resolved to become an adventurer once more. With that in mind, Lost began training hard and found a mentor to guide him, continuing as a healer but also developing a variety of other adventure skills. As time passed, he encountered the members of the Lightning Blades and joined their group. Considering all this, it made sense that Lost would dream about that event. If he hadn't heard that young girl's words, perhaps he would have given up on being an adventurer for good, and he also wouldn't have met Narcina. Speaking of her, the woman knocked on the healer's door at that very moment, asking if he was still awake. When Lost opened the door, she invited him to have breakfast with her, and so the two set off together to share a meal. Later on, they returned to the dungeon and decided to venture deeper than they had last time. As they continued their journey, they eventually stumbled upon a teleportation circle. Lost explained that you don't find these in every labyrinth, so it seemed a mage had placed this one here shortly after the place was discovered, though not many details were known about it. Narcina wants to know if you can be transported to other places using something like this. Lost then explains that you would need another teleportation circle to exit, as it's only possible to enter through one and exit through another. Hearing this, Narcina thinks it would be much easier to build one in the city, but quickly realizes the city could end up filled with monsters if there was a circle that led directly there. The healer chuckles and points out that, in reality, monsters can't use this method. In any case, the knowledge required to create teleportation circles was lost hundreds of years ago, and although they are quite practical, there's no way to make new ones now. With that, the duo heads towards the teleportation circle and is taken to the other side. There they find themselves in a reddish part of the dungeon, unlike the green hues that dominated the upper levels. Now they were in the intermediate levels, a deeper part of the dungeon where the challenges were tougher. For instance, when facing liches, beings without a physical body, the inexperienced Narcena tries using her usual martial arts techniques but can't hit the target. Liches are spiritual beings made of pure energy, so physical attacks are ineffective. For that reason, Lost thinks it would be better to retreat, but Narcena is determined and assures him she can defeat this opponent. With that in mind, the two come up with a plan and put it into action. First, the healer distracts the lich and makes it chase after him. Meanwhile, Lost reflects that with enough training, people can gain control over their prana, a spiritual energy residing within them. Well-trained martial artists are no exception. When their fists are enveloped in prana, their punches can destroy even spiritual beings. And so, Narcena lands a punch using this technique and defeats the lich. However, despite the victory, the fighter had been injured from her initial attempt to strike the spiritual entity. So Lost uses an item that boosts healing effects and casts a spell on her, thanks to the magical stone embedded in the item, which amplifies the spell's power. The guild passes these stones to artisans who craft special items from them. Eventually, these items make their way back to the adventurers. After being healed and speaking of magical stones, Narcena wonders how much they'll profit from the one they obtained by defeating the lich. Back at the guild, Amherst is once again astounded by the number of stones the pair managed to collect and asks them to return as often as they can. As they leave the guild now at night, Lost remarks that he hadn't expected them to earn so much from those stones, and Narcena agrees. It was a big surprise. Suddenly, a crowd forms up ahead where two guys are fighting over something. The duo approaches to see what's going on, and Lost notes that these kinds of disputes have become quite common as adventurers who got into trouble elsewhere have been flocking to this city. This reminds Narcena of something Amherst had mentioned. According to Lost, it's a huge inconvenience for adventurers and townspeople to follow the rules, but he decides to let it go, saying it's time to celebrate the money they earned today with a nice dinner. And indeed, the dinner is quite lavish. With the plates already on the table, Mary, the tavern owner, asks Lost if he has enough money to pay for it all, and he assures her that he does. On top of that, you wouldn't mind some beer. Narcena makes the same request, but Mary's daughter informs her that they don't serve alcohol to children. Narcena threatens to protest, but Lost agrees it's a bit too soon for his companion to be drinking beer, so they drop the subject. In the middle of the meal, Narcena asks about a strange building with no doors or windows, as there are several of them around the city, and she has no idea what they are. Lost admits he was curious about them too and was surprised to find out that even the workers who built them didn't know what they were for, nor who ordered their construction. The worker said the project came from an agent who represented another agent, and so on. Faced with this, Narcena comments that whoever commissioned these buildings clearly didn't want to be identified. But Lost doesn't mind as long as it's not harming anyone, though he would have preferred they built a wall around the city instead of these odd structures. Narcena agrees, as the city might be vulnerable, especially since it doesn't even have a moat, but at the same time, she likes being able to see far into the distance. Lost insists that this is bad in times of war, as it would be impossible to stop enemies from entering, but the girl isn't worried about invaders. Whatever shows up in Mardat, whether thieves or monsters, the adventurers of this city will be able to drive them out. Later, after returning home and saying their goodbyes, they each head to their rooms. Well, almost. Narcena briefly calls out to her companion to say something, but then changes her mind and pretends it was nothing. As she lies alone in her bed, she regrets not saying once again that she would have preferred to share a room with him. Meanwhile, Lost feels content to be part of a group again. Even though he believes he'll never meet that little girl again, he feels that thanks to Narcena, they'll be able to keep adventuring for a while longer. The next day, Margulis introduces the newest healer of the Lightning Blades, named Lyra. She greets the rest of the group, but the other girls don't seem thrilled about the new member. Siberia won't even look at her, while Armia struggles to say anything at all. On the other hand, the leader is absolutely ecstatic, assuring everyone that now they'll be able to defeat the Hydra. Meanwhile, an old man sitting on a throne asks if the sleeping princess is in this city, and his subordinate informs him that she's joined a group with Lost. Short on time, the old man orders his subordinate to get rid of the useless healer. Far away in a dark territory shrouded in shadows and surrounded by dead trees, Margulis notices that the Hydra's severed heads still haven't regrown. With that in mind, he announces that he and Lyra will launch the attack, while Armia stays back to provide magical support and Siberia should sneak around to catch the enemy off guard. Lyra, however, reminds him that she's a healer and shouldn't be on the front lines, which the leader finds odd because Lost always did. She finds it absurd to force a healing class into close combat, but the warrior explains that Lost usually charge in like a madman, though occasionally landing a good hit. Siberia adds that it was the healer himself who cut off the Hydra's heads, but the leader insists that Lyra stay in the rear due to her limitations as he'll handle the front alone. Meanwhile, the protagonist and his partner return to the guild after another day of gathering to trade the items they acquired in today's expedition for money. Judging by the quality of their haul, Amidst assumes the group ventured back into the intermediate levels of the dungeon and warns them to be careful as there's a limit for those who usually explore in pairs. She even suggests they recruit new members to increase their ability to tackle bigger challenges. Lost agrees that it's a good idea but prefers to keep things as they are for now. Nonetheless, Amidst compliments their recent performance, noting that soon they'll be able to afford renting a house with the money they've been making. Narcena doesn't quite understand what the receptionist meant, so the healer explains that groups with more than enough money can rent a private house and use it as their base of operations. Amidst adds that inns have limits on how much gear and supplies you can store, and besides, the cost isn't cheap. But since the two of them are a couple, they could also use the house as a love nest. Feeling embarrassed by this remark, Narcena becomes furious. Meanwhile, Lost recalls that the Lightning Blade group also rented a house, though his room was merely a storage space. Amidst reflects that those guys really took advantage of the healer's kindness, and she admits that, in the end, it was probably for the best that he got kicked out. As night falls and they return home, Margulis is seething with anger for failing to defeat the Hydra once again. While healing Armia, Lyra observes that the man is eager to take on the creature head-on despite not having the strength for it, forcing the warrior to swallow the harsh truth. At the same time, Siberia and Margulis admit that Lost wasn't as useless as they had thought. Despite everyone's complaints, he got the job done, and he never even realized that they were paying him less while he was part of the team. This leaves Margulis to wonder why Lost had to leave, to which the rogue replies that it was the leader himself who kicked him out. Comically surprised, Margulis doesn't even remember doing so, but since it happened, he figures the reconciliation will be easy. All he has to do is go to the guild and tell the healer to come back because they're the famous Lightning Blade group, and no one in their right mind would turn down an invitation from him. Hours later, Armia wakes up to find Lyra asleep beside her, having stayed by her side until she couldn't keep her eyes open any longer. The mage gently calls out to the healer, who wakes and asks how she's feeling, to which Armia assures her she's feeling much better. Grateful, the older woman offers to fetch something for her to eat. When the mage agrees, Lyra goes to look for the others in the house, only to find neither of them present. In fact, the two had gotten back to the guild to invite Lost to rejoin the Lightning Blade. Everyone around them is stunned by the bombshell of a proposal, while Lost tries to wrap his head around what he just heard. Margulis repeats himself, and Amidst explains to Narcena that this man is the leader of Lost's former group. Margulis adds that he understands the healer's hesitation in returning, as it's certainly not easy to keep up with a first-class adventurer like him. But there's no need to worry, because if anything goes wrong, Margulis will surely be there to save his beloved healer. Lost responds that this isn't the issue, prompting Margulis to assume it's about the money. He even mentions that there was a calculation error in Lost's previous payments, though he's unsure how that happened. Pushing that aside, Margulis insists that the group's new healer is completely useless, so it would be great if Lost returned to help the old team. After hearing the offer, Lost smiles and thanks him, leading everyone to believe he's going to rejoin the Lightning Blade. Outraged, Narcena steps in front of him, determined to stop that awful man from laying a finger on her friend. After all, Lost is now her partner and is greatly valued for it. With that, Lost thanks Narcena for standing up for him and explains to Margulis that he only said thank you out of politeness. He has a new group now and has no desire to leave it. Margulis insists that he reconsider, even accusing Narcena of trying to exploit the healer and manipulate his pay. To make matters worse, the man accuses the guild of being complicit in this and tells the healer to open his eyes because he's being deceived. Fed up with the provocation, Lost loses his patience, grabs the man by the wrist, and tells him he holds no grudge for what they did to him in the past. But if Margulis keeps pointing fingers at Narcena, he doesn't know what he'll do. After that, Lost walks away without further explanation. Furious, Margulis demands that Amidst introduce him to a new adventurer who's strong enough to hold the front lines. The guild employee is tired of doing this for him, but he loudly declares for everyone to hear that the Lightning Blade will defeat that Hydra no matter what. At that moment, a man steps forward and asks if he fits the bill. Margulis sizes up the adventurer and draws his sword to test the man's skills. Amidst warns that the guild isn't an arena, but the warrior doesn't care and lunges at the stranger. In an instant, Margulis is disarmed with ease, leaving everyone in awe of the adventurer's skill. Without much grace, Margulis yells to the crowd that he was just taking it easy on the stranger but decides to recruit the man. Siberia asks if he's really going to trust someone who doesn't show his face, to which the leader responds that he only needs to trust his sword, nothing else. Besides, they don't have time for mistakes anymore. If they keep failing against the Hydra, rumors will continue to spread that the lightning blade is incapable of defeating the creature, which will sink the group's reputation like a stone. Then Margulis asks for the recruit's name, and he replies, Shig, though he stumbles, correcting himself as if he made it up on the spot. Later on, Narcena hears someone knocking on the door and goes to see who it is, only to find that it was Sheila, the innkeeper's daughter, knocking on Lost's room. For a moment, Narcena feels like she's being deceived, but she convinces herself that Sheila wouldn't do such a thing. During this time, Lost shows up and Sheila informs him and Narcena that they have visitors. The pair heads downstairs and meets Lyra and Armia at one of the tables. First things first, Armia apologizes for everything and acknowledges that this isn't something she should be discussing with Lost, but she really needs help. Lyra explains that Margulis has hired a new warrior and is going after the Hydra once again, while the mage adds that now she realizes how strong Lost is, because if he hadn't cut off a few of the Hydra's heads, the entire group would have been wiped out. Speaking of which, she asks Lost to join them again, taking advantage of the Hydra still being weakened so they can finish it off once and for all. Faced with this new request for him to return to the Lightning Blade, Lost imagines that the mage doesn't know her leader made the same offer earlier. Narcena questions why Armia is so determined to help this group, considering she probably has a hard time dealing with Margulis as well. Armia admits that the guy is authoritarian, impulsive, and cowardly, not to mention rude, stubborn, vengeful, gluttonous, and greedy, and he never brushes his teeth. But even so, he's still her companion. At this, Narcena slams her hand on the table and asks what the hell Lost meant to her, because she always knew he was mistreated within the group, and she never did anything. Regarding this, the mage admits she was too scared to take any action against Margulis or Siberia, and she was the one who pointed the finger at Lost, accusing him of being responsible for the team's defeats. Remembering this, the young girl starts to cry and explains that she's only recently become an adventurer and doesn't know any other groups, so she didn't exactly understand what she was doing. But now she realizes Margulis was wrong. Even so, she feels she can't turn her back on a companion. As she says this, Armia breaks down in tears, and Lyra reveals that the girl had wanted to apologize to Lost all this time. She asks the healer to at least accept her apology. Lost then extends his hand, telling her there's no need to cry because, as he said yesterday, he holds no grudge against anyone in the group. Without hesitation, the girl grabs her former companion's hand and thanks him for his understanding, though he makes it clear once again that he has no intention of returning to the Lightning Blade. Saddened, Armia lowers her head and says she understands. At that moment, Mary arrives with a true feast for the customers, stating that Armia looks far too pale, and she can't let a little girl leave her restaurant with this sad face. As the mage digs in, Narcena asks Lyra if she can get the mage out of the group with her, to which the healer replies that if she could, she wouldn't be there with her. In fact, Lyra emphasizes that Armia is a kind girl. Hearing this, Lost recalls Margulis calling Lyra useless and remarks that she too will have trouble in the group she's with. Still, Lyra doesn't think she could leave the team and abandon Armia, which Lost understands. Later on, Lyra returns home and runs into the new recruit of the Lightning Blade, but addresses him as Sieg, to which Margulis corrects her, saying his name is Shig. With no more time for nonsense, the leader calls all the members to get ready for another round against the Hydra, while Lyra asks Sieg what he thinks he's doing there. Sieg plays dumb and pretends he doesn't know her, but as he turns away, she recognizes that he's carrying Ronaldo's sword and asks if it was stolen. Nervously, Sieg explains that he inherited the weapon from his mentor, but realizing he said too much, he pretends he's never heard of this Ronaldo. Meanwhile, Lost and Narcena set off on another journey. Similarly, the Lightning Blade does the same, with Margulis more confident than ever in victory this time as the team marches once again into Hydra territory. Regarding the expelled member of this group, he continues with his new partner, delving into the deepest dungeons, always seeking greater challenges for both to evolve. Alone, Narcena faces burly orcs armed with heavy clubs. Using her martial skills, she only needs her body's strength to defeat opponents more than triple her size. After destroying these orcs, Narcena is asked by Lost if she would like to rest a bit, but she seems quite ready to continue. The problem is her stomach starts to rumble as soon as the sentence ends, to the healer laughs and remarks that even the tireless Narcena gets hungry at times. With that in mind, he invites his companion to lunch. Soon, when everything is set for them to eat, Lost is startled by the amount of food available to them. Narcena explains that when they left the inn, Mary said the young lady hadn't eaten anything, so she gave her this heap of food. As they eat, the healer explains that the Hydra is a highly venomous monster, in addition to having an extremely muscular body and very resistant scales capable of repelling both physical and magical attacks. Given this information, Narcena does not hide her terror, hence she questions if Armia will be okay. About that, Lost mentions that hydras are not found just anywhere, but compared to other, stronger monsters, they are relatively common. For that reason, research and strategies against it are well developed. For example, its venom, which if not treated, can lead to death. An antidote was invented to handle this problem, and it's not even that hard to find this substance in Mardat. That is, considering it's not cheap, so some groups tend to rely heavily on a support healer. In the case of Blade of Lightning, they will have to be cautiously monitored by Lyra. However, as much as Margulis seems just a braggart, Lost assures that he's a skilled swordsman, and as long as he stays in good shape and doesn't underestimate the opponent, he's a considerable warrior. Besides him, Siberia is also excellent in terms of speed and agility, and we have to consider that the Hydra has so many heads that provide a multiple field of vision to the creature, but Siberia might still sneak up and catch the monster from behind. After hearing all this explanation, Narcena jealously comments that the healer is full of praise for Blade of Lightning, and Lost awkwardly responds that he is just stating the facts. With that said, the girl decides not to delve further and drops the subject. As the journey continues, she calls her partner's attention to emphasize that the two go to the same labyrinth every day, and this is starting to tire her. Since that is the case, Lost wants to know if she would like to try a different place. Then Narcena confesses that it would be good to pass by the nearby swamps. Meanwhile, Blade of Lightning moves against the dreaded Hydra. Right at the beginning, Margulis strikes a blow capable of causing serious damage to one of the monster's necks. Then C repeats the gesture and cuts off another head, but when it comes to cutting his second, he simply holds back. Margulis questions why he did that, and the warrior replies that perhaps the leader wanted to keep the credits for being a Hydra slayer. As for that, the leader laughs arrogantly and replies that the guy knows his stuff. Next, he advances on the Hydra, but is almost hit by it. While healing Siberia, Lyra asks why the guy is attacking head-on, and the rogue replies that this is the charm of the night. The healer doesn't understand what kind of charm that is, but as soon as she finishes regenerating her partner, Siberia is ready to fight again and leaves the subject aside. With this, the healer looks around and wonders what Seed is planning since he is standing still, not getting directly involved in the fight. Anyway, she notes that the attacks he applied affected the Hydra's health as it is moving sooner. With this advantage, Siberia will draw the creature's attention and allow Margulis to continue striking. Lastly, Armia cooperates with her spells and forms a solid support unit. If everyone continues at this pace, the Hydra will certainly be defeated. However, the Hydra throws a rock at Armia and knocks down the mage, making her an easy target for the monster, which approaches with one of its heads and provokes immense fear in the girl. This fear expels a bizarre substance that Siberia has no idea what it is, so Seed explains that monsters can ingest a person's fear and transform it into energy. Now, what impresses C is that this fear is usually not visible. Lyra touches the energy in the air and realizes that it is mana, and that it should not be flowing in this place as it can only be found in the depths of a labyrinth. Finally, as the Hydra absorbs this mana, it begins to undergo a mutation because, according to the healer of Blades of Lightning, monsters are capable of absorbing a huge amount of mana and transforming their bodies to enhance their abilities. Due to this critical situation, Seed asks Lyra to take care of Armia while calling Margulis to retreat. The leader questions why they have to do this just now that they have gotten here and asserts that he can still cut off the Hydra's heads to earn his title of Hydra Slayer. However, when striking the creature with his sword, the warrior sees his weapon being broken, which makes him vulnerable before the enemy. Without wasting time, the Hydra attacks the man, but Lost arrives just in time and prevents the death of his former teammate. Seeing that a healer has arrived for support, C asks him to take care of Armia. Then the healer reaches the mage and questions Lyra about her condition. Lyra explains that since she is a sorceress, the girl has high resistance to magic, so healing spells may not have much effect. In other words, trying to heal Armia is like drying ice. However, Lost takes responsibility and begins to invoke several healing spells at the same time in order to overlay one on top of the other, a tactic he used frequently when he was still with Blade of Lightning. Lyra was startled by this and pointed out that you can't cure a cold by throwing a bunch of medicine at someone all at once. However, Armia began to regain consciousness and showed she was still alive, although not in any condition to fight. Following that, C warned that the Hydra seemed to be summoning Lost, so the healer explained that it must remember him from past encounters. Narcena asked to help her friend in the fight and Lost allowed it, but he told her to back off if it got dangerous. At the same time, Sieg said the rest of the Blade of Lightning should stay out of it, and everyone accepted the terms, especially since Margulis was out of commission due to his broken sword. Thus, Lost and Narcena attacked their opponent and demonstrated a strength Margulis had no idea his former teammate possessed. The warrior didn't understand why Sieg's sword didn't break, so Lyra explained that it was a magical sword, a legendary weapon containing great power. Margulis thought such equipment was only a legend, but even if not, he wondered how Seed could wield such an armament. In the midst of this, Narcena kept up the offense against the Hydra but ended up taking a blow and was taken hostage. With this move, Lost deduced the Hydra was demanding a one-on-one fight with him. Narcena couldn't understand how a monster could be so intelligent, and Lara explained that creatures that undergo mutations could evolve both their intelligence and their wickedness. With that, Lost told everyone to stay out of it and advanced against his enormous enemy. However, at that moment, a man far away noticed the movement of the wind on a lit candle, wrote something on a sheet, and closed his eyes. This behavior caused the healer to instantly collapse. For a moment, Lost tried to get up to help his fallen companion, but then he passed out. Seconds later, the young man woke up again and stood with a powerful energy flowing around his body. At that moment, the man who caused this reaction pondered about that which should have remained asleep. Then a horn grew on Lost's forehead. The Hydra charged at the boy, but he reacted instantly and cut off all the creature's heads at once, ending the fight. Similarly, the young man collapsed again and fainted. Shortly after, he woke up and asked how Narcena was, and she explained she was fine because Lyra had bought an antidote. By the way, the healer made it clear it was quite expensive, so she demanded reimbursement. Aside from that, the woman questioned what had happened to Lost for him to take on that strange form, but the young man had no idea what she meant. Cynically, Margulis said he always knew how incredible Lost was and that with him, the group could defeat the toughest monsters, even the master of the Mardat Labyrinth. Moreover, he promised to divide the Hydra's magical stones among 3 people. The healer didn't understand why the division was only for 3 people, so the leader explained he was talking about himself, Lost, and Siberia, because the 2 rookies had done nothing and would have their wages docked. As for the young lady who came with the healer, she would be just an assistant and wouldn't get anything either. Lost asked about Armia, then Siberia replied that she was gone because they didn't even know if she would ever wake up, much less if she was still useful as a mage. Speaking of which, Margulis even said they could sell the witch because the girl was pretty, and there are plenty of weirdos out there who like that look. Without delay, Narcena punched the insolent man in the face, who began to threaten to expel her from the guild as aggression among adventurers was forbidden. However, Seed and Lara claimed they saw nothing, cutting the swordsman's argument short right away. On the other hand, Siberia assured that she saw everything and would testify in favor of the leader, so Seed backtracked and admitted he saw something. In fact, he heard Margulis talking about selling the team member on the black market, and as a guild representative, he could not ignore such a thing, so he ordered everyone present to accompany him. Back in the city, everyone learned that C was an adventurer officially sent by the Adventurers Guild in the Royal City to manage other adventurers because public safety was deteriorating in that city. Being tasked with an investigation, Seed arrived at Blade of Lightning and discovered what they had done. For that reason, they would not only be expelled from the guild, but because of the threat of human trafficking, they would be sentenced to forced labor for the rest of their lives. As Margulis and Siberia panicked, Lost called Seed for a chat. Outside, he asked the representative from the Royal City to spare his former teammates from the punishment, because although today that Do sought adventure only for fame and money, Lost believed they weren't like that at the beginning. So he believed they could be given a second chance to start over. Upon this request, C ordered Margulis and Siberia to go to the farthest city possible and never return, a demand the pair promptly accepted and then ran off before the man changed his mind. Ambrose asked if that was the right decision, so he responded that he would spend more time in Mardat and keep an eye on the 2. Narcena felt guilty for having provoked the exile of the 2, but Lost assured her that it was the best thing to do. Moreover, he thanked his companion for everything she had done today and continued to count on her for whatever came their way. Later, C discussed with Lyra about watching the Mardat Guild because the Royal City suspected that the problems there were due to the branch or the local master, so he asked the healer to form a group with him to help. She agreed as long as he included Armia in the team because Lyra couldn't abandon the young woman. Stieg didn't argue, especially since he felt he couldn't leave Lost to his own devices and wanted to stay close to these youths. The next day, the new team informs the healer and the martial artist that they grouped up. Narcena comments that they formed a balanced trio, a warrior, a healer, and a mage. Meanwhile, Lost asks Armia if she's okay with this new development in her life. Seemingly confused, the sorceress replies that she had nowhere else to go and owes a debt to Lara and Seed for saving her. On this matter, they had already told her not to worry, but if repaying the debt makes her feel better, then so be it. Finally, Lost and Narcena highlight that the mage has made new friends now and needs to have the strength to move on. After this meeting, the fighter wants to know what she and Lost are going to do today, and the boy explains that they'll stop by the guild first as they forgot to exchange the Hydra's magic stones for money yesterday. Additionally, he suggests that they accept a mission there because this is an important source of income for adventurers. Narcena is well aware of this, as jobs like eliminating monsters, collecting special items, or serving as bodyguards can earn good money. Furthermore, Lost adds that missions are a good way to gain experience, a remark that moves Narcina because even in this the boy thought of her. Seeing that the girl blushed, the healer understands why she's acting this way, but she pretends it's nothing and continues on her way to the guild with her face all red. Upon their arrival, they sense a heavy atmosphere in the air with all the guild members staring directly at them with stern faces. According to the murmur of the crowd, they learn that Lost the Useless was responsible for killing the Hydra. Noticing this, Lost asks his partner to keep her eyes open because they're the talk of the town, and someone might try to steal a Hydra's magic stone. Shortly after, an adventurer named Marnell approaches the duo with his group and asks for a minute to talk to the healer. Suspicious, Lost wants to know if it has to be now, so Marnell deduces that his companions are making the boy cautious, hence he asks them to step away. With them, at a distance, the adventurer asks the healer to overlook the behavior of the guys as they were curious about how Lost the Useless killed such a feared creature. Amidst this, the healer comments to Narcina that this guy doesn't seem to be after the stone until Marnell bows before the boy and expresses regret about the situation with Margulis because every adventurer in this town knew what he was doing, including Marnell and his companions. We decided to turn a blind eye to that behavior and let Lost handle such a wicked man alone. Moreover, many from the same guild still mocked Lost by calling him useless, and Marnell admits he was one of them but hopes he can be forgiven. As such, the adventurer wants to know what he could do to earn Lost's forgiveness, so Narcina replies that the guy could kneel and keep apologizing for 3 days and 3 nights because mere 3 days are nothing compared to the years of suffering the healer had to endure. According to the girl, even if a storm of spears were to fall on Marnell for days, it still wouldn't be enough for him to redeem himself. Desperate, Lost asks his partner to stop acting this way because if this guy accepts that punishment, everyone will start thinking that the wicked one there is him. Moreover, even though he defeated the Hydra, it doesn't change the fact that he still considers himself just a failed healer who can only use healing magic. For this reason, he still sees himself as the same useless person as always and would like Marnell to keep calling him that way. Having said that, the boy extends his hand to the adventurer, which really confuses him. But the man reciprocates the gesture and assures that in the future, if Lost ever has any problems, he can always count on him. After that, Lost leaves Amherst dumbfounded with the rare item he brought to the counter. He and Narcina want to know if the stone has lost value because of this strange mutation, but the employee explains that on the contrary, it now is worth 10 times more, maybe even more than that, because monster mutations do not occur frequently, and one of the reasons the stones are valuable is because of their rarity. The only remark from the attendant is that the mutation requires a large amount of mana, which is why it usually only happens in the depths of a labyrinth. On this subject, Lost comments that the Hydra mutated in swamp zones, so it's possible that magic can accumulate outside of labyrinths. Amherst adds that despite this, it's hard to believe there's enough mana to cause a mutation, so Lost concludes that something is wrong in the labyrinth. Narcina questions whether the guild takes action in such situations, while Lost stresses that they should organize an expedition team to identify the source of the problem. In the midst of this conversation, Handsome appears behind the counter and makes Amherst nervous. She explains that there is a problem that needs attention, so the man shows himself willing to listen. Soon he reads a report showing that intermediate-level monsters are spreading to higher levels in addition to the confirmed mutation outside of a labyrinth. Despite this, Handsome thinks these issues are not important enough and decides to ignore them, but Lost believes that adventurers could get hurt if things continue as they are. About this, Handsome explains that adventurers are already aware of the risks involved in this job, and as Lost insists that they should be warned about this situation as a precaution. The man says that if the healer is so scared, he should leave town. As they leave Handsome's office, Narcina gets angry with the man's behavior, but the healer prefers to let it go. Amherst explains that that citizen has always been like that and adds that Mist, the true master of the guild, rarely appears there because of his advanced age. Apparently, the man is so old that he only stays locked in the office, so it's Handsome who ends up managing the branch. Lost comments that he must be a capable person for the job, but the employee thinks this guy always expects people to be perfect, and instead of ignoring minor mistakes, he criticizes them severely, so much so that all the employees are afraid of him. Changing the subject, Lost has a request to make to the woman. Following that, they sit together while the attendant shows them the missions currently available, like gathering medicinal herbs or searching for lost adventurers. Narcina reads about a job where the client wants an escort for fishing inside a maze, which irritates her because she thinks it's not a job worthy of an adventurer. Running out of patience, Amherst throws out the saying, "If it pays well, why not?" before flicking the girl's forehead as a form of reprimand. Afterwards, the pair finally find a monster elimination mission, which excites the fighter. However, Amherst doesn't recommend this task because it involves a phoenix that has landed near a teleportation circle on the intermediate levels and now has a bounty on its head. The job could bring in good money. but a healer and a martial artist fighting a phoenix might not end well. Nevertheless, Marcena seems motivated to take on this mission, so her companion adds that the phoenix is a flying creature and it would be quite difficult to defeat it without ranged attacks. For this mission, Amherst suggests that they recruit a warrior, a mage, and another healer with a large area healing ability to heal all group members at once. With that said, Loss and Marcena know exactly who to call. Without wasting time, they approach Seed and Lyra with a proposal. Whispering to her teammate, the healer comments that it will be much easier to monitor Loss working alongside him. While Armia can hardly believe that the boy really wants to work with her. Lost explains that he finds the mage very talented, which is why she is always welcome in the group. Still, she feels she doesn't deserve this opportunity because she was so terrible to the healer before, but the man emphasizes that the girl realizes she was awful, so she won't do it again. Thus, the sorceress agrees to join the team, and Lost sets that they will depart tomorrow morning for the job. Steve will be responsible for notifying the guild that they are leaving, while the rest of the team members go shopping for what they need to take on the expedition. Later, Lost takes Narcena to the drugstore because burns heal faster with medicine in addition to just casting healing spells. Hearing this explanation, the girl emphasizes that her friend really knows his stuff, not just about healing elements, but about life in general. As she says these words, she enters a strange state of sadness and ends up mentally isolating herself. However, a woman hugs her from behind and calls her by her nickname, Nar. Narcena turns to punch this person, but she dodges with agility. It turns out to be Ralma, and Narcena is surprised because the two haven't seen each other for many years. Ralma is a high-level mage known as the Fire Goddess, and she accepted Narcena's father's request to check on his daughter since Nar suddenly left home as if she were fleeing. By the way, looking at Lost, the mage suspects that this young man might be behind the escape. The healer responds that it's good to see his master again, and this statement leaves Narcena speechless. Soon, the three of them meet in a tavern, and Lost explains that there was a period when he studied under Ralma's tutelage. Meanwhile, Narcena knows this woman because she's an old friend of her father's. Speaking of which, the mage asks the healer to leave the table because she wants to discuss personal matters with Narcena, but the boy refuses because he and Nar are part of a group, meaning the two trust each other. Besides, he deduces that Ralma might have been instructed to drive the martial artist back home against her will. Having demonstrated that he's not the same naive student he once was by dodging a fireball from the former master, Lost convinces Ralma that he can stay at the table. Then Narcena explains that she didn't run away from home. She was just in a hurry and didn't have time to tell her parents that she was leaving, but she did leave a note that said, "I'm off to see the young man, don't worry." Immediately, Lost and Ralma realize that this is the worst thing a girl her age could write to her parents when leaving home unannounced. But setting that aside, the mage questions why she left home in the first place. Hesitating, Marcena implies it's because of loss, but she strives not to say that all this time she's had people who serve her family to protect the healer, and that when she learned he was expelled from the Blade of Lightning, she ran from home to seize this opportunity. Lost thinks Nar should return to ask for her father's approval, but she's terrified she might not be able to see the young man again. Either way, Ralma promises to take care of it. Afterwards, she asks Lost to order a drink for her, even though she can't handle a strong dose of alcohol, so the healer goes after something. Alone with Nar, Ralma comments that the girl is silly for showing this fear of not having Lost nearby, yet the fighter emphasizes that this is no ordinary man because besides being very skilled in battle, he always puts the needs of others above his own. Although Narcena considers herself a burden for coming to help Lost, in fact, it was she who was helped by him. Regarding this, Ralma tells that Lost was not like this before and that he became a decent man because of Narcena even challenging the mage herself to protect her friend. With that said, Narcena leaves the tavern happier alongside her companion, while the Fire Goddess announces it's time to do her real job there. Thus, she heads to the guild, where the office of the branch master, Amidst, is located to find out what he's up to. The next day, the group gathers for the expedition. Sheila hands a food basket to the adventurers and asks if the phoenix is very strong. Then Narcena grabs the basket out of jealousy and explains that everything will be fine because she will protect the team. Yet Mary's daughter explains that's exactly why she's worried. With that, everyone bursts into laughter, and then the adventurers set off on their mission. With the journey ending, the group arrives at a dungeon and teleports inside. Once there, Narcena's first reaction is to look around. Noticing nothing nearby, she comments that she thought the phoenix would be there as soon as they entered. Lots laughs and replies that the place is too narrow for a monster of that size. With that, the team resumes their walk, and Seed comments that winged monsters dislike small places. They tend to seek a home with high ceilings and a wide view of the surroundings. Soon, they reach the deeper parts of the labyrinth, where the corridors are wider. Armia remarks that this place is just as Seed described, with a high ceiling and broad view. Lara is sure that the phoenix is nearby and adds that there is a recently discovered passage in this area that hasn't been explored yet, likely filled with treasures and items waiting to be found. However, Sieg explains that a powerful monster is blocking the way there, and that's why no one dares to explore the place. The guild has even put a bounty on this creature's head. Further on, Lost finds burn marks on a pillar, so Sieg believes the phoenix's nest must be close. To lure the beast, the healer throws a stone down the dark corridor because these birds are extremely territorial and wouldn't let intruders pass through their domain peacefully. At that moment, a portal opens at ceiling height and a fireball emerges, soon revealing itself to be a phoenix. Back in Mardat, Amidst is enjoying her boredom alone inside the guild until Ralma appears and is greeted enthusiastically by the staff member. The sorceress notes that this branch seems warm to adventurers, and the receptionist becomes even more excited, justifying that the guild exists because of the adventurers, so it's only fair. However, Amidst knows well that she would never treat every adventurer who crosses that door so kindly. In fact, this flattery is only for those in positions of power. Ralma might not be dressed very luxuriously, but the factory that made her outfit is high-end. Besides, the accessories she carries might look ordinary at first glance, but each piece is a costly magical item. In other words, Amidst believes that Ralma is an important adventurer and cannot let her slip away. Finally, she asks what she can do for the visitor, and Ralma informs her that she would like to see the president of this branch. However, the mage had no appointment with him, and to make matters worse, she makes it clear that she kind of wants to kill the guy. This is too much for Amidst, who declares that the foreigner has crossed the line and warns that she will not be able to see the person responsible for the guild. Then the mage resorts to brutality by summoning a fireball in one hand, sending Amidst running while the other adventurers present become apprehensive. At that moment, Handsome appears and explains that whatever Ralma wants to discuss with the president, she can speak with him. Amidst is surprised that Handsome knows the woman, and he reveals that she is the goddess of fire and that if she wanted, she could turn the entire guild into ashes. Back in the dungeon, the phoenix does not come down from its high perch and remains out of the human's reach. Given this, Lot suggests using a bow instead of a sword, but before any decision is made, the bird attacks fiercely, unleashing a breath of flames on Narcina, forcing the healer to save his friend in the nick of time. Afterwards, he emphasizes that although the phoenix attacks, sometimes with beak and claws, its most important trump card is this fireball. In Handsome's office, the guild's head imagines that the woman wants to talk about an event that happened yesterday. After all, an adventurer mentioned that something strange happened in the labyrinth and wanted the guild to take care of it. Ralma asks how Handsome dealt with it, and he replies that he sent the adventurer away if he was scared. About this, Ralma points out that it has been a long time since she arrived in Mardat, but this city seems full of bandits. Then she asks directly if Handsome was not one of those responsible for bringing these groups there. Handsome does not understand the reason for the accusation, while the mage emphasizes that the entire city is now surrounded by strange pillars, something that even the guild leader does not understand. He claims that it has nothing to do with the guild, but Ralma has her doubts, trusting her intuition. Upon hearing that the woman is basing such serious accusations on intuition, he cannot help but laugh and comments that her story is quite elaborate. With less patience, Ralma responds that the Adventurers Guild of a city with a labyrinth always holds a great deal of power, so much so that the guild master is practically a king of the territory. Nevertheless, Handsome claims to know absolutely nothing about what is happening in Mardat. He explains that he is just an assistant to the real president, but Ralma slams the table and tells him to stop playing the fool. After all, not only did Handsome bring these criminal adventurers to the city, but he also expels the true members of the association just for questioning certain things that are happening. It seems that the Mardat branch is preparing for a situation it created itself, where it will need a large number of disposable adventurers at its disposal, like a revolt in the labyrinth. In the midst of this, Lost Root tries to protect themselves as best they can from the Phoenix of Bombardment, which never approaches the ground at any moment and attacks the humans with its fireballs. Mara warns that, at this rate, the bird will turn the whole area into a sea of fire, and while the flames may be a problem, the fire consuming all the oxygen is an even greater issue. Lost believes the Phoenix hasn't come down because it thinks it wouldn't emerge unscathed against 5 enemies, so Seed questions the term think that the healer used. Actually, he corrects, saying that the bird is acting on survival instincts to avoid unnecessary danger since it has the advantage of flight. In any case, C knows they have no choice but to fight against it, so he summons Armia to use some long-range water affinity magic. The goal is to launch this magic at the Phoenix wings, as the flames covering the bird are like feathers. By extinguishing the fire with water, it may not cause the Phoenix to fall, but at least it will bring it closer, allowing it to be attacked with swords. According to the leader, it's clear that it will take some time before the spell is potent enough to damage the Phoenix, and during this period, Armia will be vulnerable. However, she shouldn't be afraid, as Sieg himself will draw the phoenix's fire and ensure it doesn't touch the mage. With that said, Narcena assures Armia that Sieg isn't the only one protecting her. The entire group is there for her, a sentiment echoed by Lost. Quickly, Sieg, Lost, and Narcena dash to draw the bird's attention, freeing Armia to cast her water magic. Watching the scene unfold, Lara reflects that, considering everything the mage has been through, it might not be easy for her, but she needs to learn to trust her team members. Once she does, she'll be on the right path to becoming a top adventurer. Finally, the sorceress completes her preparation of the water arrow and fires at the phoenix, striking its right wing. This causes the phoenix to fall to a height low enough for Sieg to attack with his sword. However, the cut isn't deep enough to finish the enemy, although it does significant damage. Back at the Mardet branch office, Handsome denies all accusations about a supposed labyrinth uprising. Ralma knows it's not an everyday occurrence, but given the recent disturbances in the city, it could be a warning sign of an imminent uprising. One thing that particularly bothers her is the monster mutations, because there's a massive amount of mana accumulated in the city and around the labyrinth. At that moment, the phoenix begins its mutation process, nearly doubling in size, and its intense red hue changes to blue. Armia despairs upon witnessing a second mutation in such a short time, because when she faced the Hydra, she nearly died. Lara worries that the same situation might occur again, which would make the mutant monster even stronger. Worse, if Armia succumbs to her fears, she might never overcome them. With this in mind, the healer tells the mage to run, but her legs freeze in fear. Thus, Lara grabs the girl by the arm just as the phoenix launches a fireball. There wasn't time for the two to escape, and death seems certain, but Sieg intervenes just in time, slicing the flames in half and preventing a tragedy. Not just once, but as the phoenix repeats its attack against the humans, the adventurer does his best to tear through the fire. Visibly worried, Sieg tells Armia to get back on her feet because they need her magic to win. With that, the mage struggles to fight her fear alone and asks for just a bit more time to recover. Leaving the guild, Ralma is furious that Handsome pretended to be ignorant until the end, not that she expected him to confess anything. Afterwards, she goes to one of the mysterious pillars around the city and casts a fire spell, discovering that the sensation it transmits is anything but normal, even though the fire goddess has no idea what these giant columns are. Meanwhile, Narcena manages to land her first strike on the phoenix, but it seems to cause no damage to the enemy. On the contrary, it's Narcena's hand that catches fire, leaving her vulnerable to a counterattack. The phoenix pounces and Lost blocks its claws, but the intense heat from the phoenix body nearly melts the healer's sword completely. At the same time, Lara heals Armia and waits patiently for her to conjure a new attack spell, which is hard to do in such a short interval, but necessary for such a threatening situation. This time, the sorceress conjures a massive ice arrow that pierces the phoenix's right wing, causing it to fall again, though not enough to bring the bird within reach of Sieg's sword. The phoenix flies past the swordsman and heads toward the rest of the group until Narcena uses her skills to leap between the dungeon's columns, gaining height and delivering a powerful kick to the creature's skull from above. With the impact, the phoenix is thrown to the ground, giving Lost a chance to plunge his dagger into the head of the winged beast. With the victory, all group members give credit to Armia and her attack spells. She cries with emotion, thanks them for their support, and raises the phoenix's magic stone to celebrate. Alone, Sieg and Lyra lament that Lost didn't transform again, as they wanted to analyze this ability of the group member. Returning to Mardet, they find Ralma at Mary's tavern. After bribing Amers, the fire goddess learns that the healer had gone phoenix hunting and makes a point of mentioning this to him, which irritates the boy. Ralma emphasizes that Lost won the cash prize in addition to the payment for the stone, so it wouldn't hurt if he at least paid for a meal for her. On the other hand, the young man suspects the woman is more interested in the drinks, especially since she's hitting the booze hard even though she's weak with alcohol. Without delay, everyone gathers to eat something, and Narcena loves the food. Drunk, Ralma comments that the cheap meat is tough, so Sheila makes sure to serve the mage's drink by slamming the mug hard on the table. Putting that aside, Ralma believes Narcena liked the soup because she had never seen one like it at the mansion. Armia asks what mansion this is, and the fire goddess reveals that Narcena is the heiress to the Count of Analastoria. Upon hearing this, the entire group is stunned, while Lost remembers that the little girl he saved many years ago was her. Meanwhile, Handsome informs Amidst that another mutation has occurred. Additionally, the fire goddess is in town. Amidst responds that it's almost time to put his apprentice, Ralma, to work.